but we won't wait too long today because it's just an hour-long session honoring everyone at lunchtime. And so we'll probably go ahead and get started as soon as Yael is ready. If you're here though and would like to introduce yourself in the chat, please feel free to let us know where you're dialing in from today and what attracted you to join us. We're so glad you're here.
Whoop. And my computer's being very slow. All right, welcome everyone. I know some people are still trickling in. Happy Neurodiversity Celebration Week. In case you haven't been to their website, they have an amazing array of events you can attend, resources you can share with your school. It's a really amazing initiative that was started by a neurodiverse student several years ago. So check it out if you can. And so we thank Jade for joining us today to kick off the week with a perfect talk for the topic, integrating neurodivergent strengths at school. For those of you that aren't familiar with REAL, we are a nonprofit and we strive to ensure that Silicon Valley twice exceptional students thrive in school by doing events like this for parents, creating resources and having support groups, as well as working with educators, creating resources and doing professional development for educators. If you're here, you most likely know what twice exceptionality is, but just to quickly touch on it, REAL talks about twice exceptionality as having distinguishing strengths, high abilities, or potentials in one or more areas, and having complex challenges such as dyslexia, autism, ADHD, anxiety, and others at the same time. So the 2E student combines the yellow strengths and the complex blue challenges to create a green profile, and their strengths and challenges combine and interact. And so you have to support them both simultaneously, which can be a confusing profile. You can visit real2e.org to find all of our previous event recordings, blog posts, white papers, and other resources organized in this beautiful new, thank you, Abby, page so that you can find them all by topic. We have another couple of events left this school year to round out the year. We have an event with Dr. Matt Zakreski next week about sensory challenges. And then we have an event with Dr. Danica Maddox about reducing power struggles. We also have our bi-monthly parent support group, and you can RSVP for all of these at real2e.org. We also have a support group on Google, a private group, which has hundreds of local parents of 2E students asking and answering questions. So you can join there and ask and answer questions. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and all of our previous event recordings are also available on YouTube. We are very excited to release our new white paper with an educator model. As I mentioned before, we do workshops for educators. Primarily, we do learning different simulations and intro to 2E, but we do many others if you'd like to bring us to your school. And in addition, this white paper is now available on real2e.org for your review. We are just now starting to put it out there to get these ideas about what makes school great for 2E learners as well as all learners, including flexibility, strengths, developing connection and reframing behaviors. So check it out on our website. We also recently published an IEP guide for twice exceptional students, California Bay Area edition, although 95% of it is relevant to IEPs anywhere. And that's also a download you can get on our website. And I'm so happy to introduce our speaker, Dr. Jade Rivera. Thank you for joining us. She is the lab director for the Strength-Based Assessment Lab at Bridges Graduate School. She leads the lab to empower students, families, educators, and professionals in creating positive and collaborative learning experience for children facing challenges in their educational environments. With over 15 years of experience, she has designed and led micro schools beloved by quirky and sensitive children, uniquely positioning her to provide insights into positive niche construction, strength-based pedagogy, and talent development for neurodivergent children. Jade's Montessori credential and training in nonviolent communication inspire her educational philosophies and practices, including project-based learning, dual differentiation strategies, and gradeless classrooms. In 2016, the California Association for the Gifted honored Jade for distinguished service on behalf of gifted and twice exceptional children. More recently, she was recognized as a person to watch in the 2E movement by 2E News. You can learn more about her philosophy and practices in her newsletter, and we can post that in the chat. And her newest publication, Could You Live Underwater? A Design Thinking and STEM Curriculum, is now available from Routledge Publishing. She earned her ED at Bridges Graduate School of Cognitive Diversity in 2022, and it is her honor to continue working on as a professor at the same school, supporting others as they envision a strength-based world for neurodivergent humans. Thank you so much, Jade.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's great to be here. I do have a slideshow to share, and so I'd like to do that now. It was wonderful to get a rundown of all the things that Real is up to right now. It's so amazingly impressive, and what a great resource for families of your area and families, you know, all over the country, as you mentioned. So as introduced, I am Dr. Jade Rivera, and I'm here today to talk to you about strength-based IEP goals, what they are, and how to write them. We're also going to talk a little bit about strength-based education practices and how to develop an environment that is accessible to twice exceptional children and a place where they can thrive and find joy in learning. So as mentioned, I am a curriculum and learning environment designer with expertise in strength-based education for neurodivergent children. I'm the lab director for the Strength-Based Assessment Lab at Bridges Graduate School and faculty member there. I actually see some students in the audience here at this presentation, and that's really special to me. So thank you for being there. Thank you, everyone, and also I see you students, so thank you as well. So I think it's really important to start sort of each talk grounded in a rationale and an objective as to why what we're talking about is important. And this is a discrepancy that we all are quite aware of, but I just want to make it explicit that, you know, while strength-based talent development approaches in education are recognized as the best practice for twice exceptional children, a shared understanding of strength identification and strength-based talent development pedagogy is scarce among education and non-education professionals. And so that is the discrepancy, that is the gap that Bridges Graduate School, you know, in general is trying to close. And I think that we're doing a pretty good job alongside wonderful organizations like Real. So what do we mean by strength? I think that there's a lot of confusion out there about what we're talking about when we say strength-based education and what it actually looks like in practice. You know, we haven't really come to terms with how internalized our deficit mindset is. You know, it's something that we all grew up in through our own education experience. I mean, I'm speaking very generally here. I know this is the case for me and probably a lot of you as well, except for a few lucky ones out there. But, you know, we all grew up sort of drinking the water and breathing the air of a deficit mindset. And so to switch our mindset over to a strength-based one actually requires quite a bit of inner work and reflection. And it's not as easy as just, you know, identifying a strength and then speaking to that strength. And so because of that additional discrepancy, there's a lot of confusion in the field about what we mean by strength-based. So when we say strength-based, we're really talking about something that is defined as a curricular or an instructional approach that's differentiated to align with the student's cognitive styles, their learning preferences, their profiles of intelligence. So this is very individualized for the student, right? But also another aspect of what we're talking about is environments, making learning accessible to a student's strengths and their cognitive styles and their learning profiles. But before we can do that, we really need to talk about how to recognize a strength. And I swear to you, it is as simple as this. So, I have another talk that I give, which is sort of like I call it the math of strength-based identification and learning. And so when you ask adults and when you observe students and you divide those things, what you end up with is an identified strength, right? So before you can speak to strength-based IEP goals, you need to know what the student's strength is to begin with. And so when I'm receiving these sample IEP goals, right, and people are saying, okay, how do you make this strength-based? I say, well, I don't entirely know how to do that until I see, what the strengths are, until you've told me what the student loves to do, what they like to do, where they excel, their moments of personal best. And this is really what we uncover through our work with the strength-based lab. It's an exhaustive interview-based assessment where we speak to the parent, we speak to the child, we speak to the non-related adults in the child's life that have structural power about these things. Where do you see the child thriving? What are their times of personal best? But, you can start this today. So, you can really start this today, asking people around you, when do you see my child thriving? When does my child seem most comfortable? When do they seem most like themselves, right? And then observe them in those situations. And that's where you're going to hear those, that's when you're going to be able to uncover those aha moments so that you can begin to advocate for their strengths by first identifying them. So what I see in these IEP goals as well is that so much onus is placed on the child to change. And we believe, and when I say we, I'm talking about the Bridges Graduate School, and probably you believe this as well, which is that the onus really should be on the environment and the people serving the child to shift and to change and to evolve their thinking about, what learning looks like for these amazing children. And that means environmental shifts. So in our work, we talk about the intellectual environment, the emotional environment, the social environment, the creative environment, and the physical environment or the built environment. Realizing that there's overlap between those things, they sort of inform each other. But when you tease them out separately, you're able to, again, uncover strength-based solutions to make learning accessible and joyful for twice exceptional children. So I just want to give you some light ideas that you might want to research more on your own or talk about in your group as to how to actually go about building an environment where twice exceptional children thrive. So first, in the intellectual environment, we discuss compacting a curriculum, which is allowing a student to sort of test out of or demonstrate their understanding or prior knowledge about a subject that's being covered in the curriculum. And then additionally, accelerating them. So, grade skipping over courses entirely because they aren't going to offer them any new information or new experiences with regard to whatever subject they're covering. We talked about the social environment, and social environment is such a rich place for talent development to occur. So we're talking about shared interest groups, clubs, troops, teams. So when we talk about talent development, we're not just talking about developing a talent in isolation, right? Because that's not actually how we get better at something. We get better at something through the relational act of learning. And that really can happen in these shared interest groups, these clubs, these troops, etc. So much happens through talent development. That's not just developing the talent, although obviously that's very important. There's connections being made. So there's social and emotional learning that occurs there as well. So again, speaking to how these things sort of overlap and inform each other. The creative environment, so things like free time, choice, open-ended assignments. These are all very accessible ways to make the learning environment more creative for the students. in the emotional environment, making the implicit explicit. I think that there's a lot of sort of implicit understandings and rules and boundaries that occur in a learning environment that aren't overtly obvious to a lot of our students. And so they need to be made explicit at every opportunity. And then this is something that I write in nearly every single strength-based talent development report that I create, which is this child will do well with a flexible and warm teacher that overlooks small mistakes. And I don't know of a single teacher out there that would say I'm not flexible or warm. And also, I think that some educators do benefit from the reminder. And I say that as a longtime educator myself, as Yael mentioned. And then physical space, the built environment, so space to move, sensory toys and tools, things of that nature, so that the child can regulate themselves physically to access learning and to access the learning environment to the degree we're hoping they do. What do you do when you don't have a flexible and warm teacher? Well, it's difficult for me to really speak to that. I guess maybe I would get curious and I would start asking questions. I would ask them specifically, when do you see my child thriving? What do you see as my child's strengths? What does my child have going for them in the classroom? And begin a conversation and begin to build some shared language around what the child is doing right, hoping that that will open the teacher's heart and mind towards what's possible with that child. I think curiosity, is pretty much always the best way to start any conversation with a person who is in a position to affect your child's life, and learning. Just one moment, I'm going to take a little sip of water. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so now I figure the best thing to do is just to start to get into some of these goals. So these are sample goals that I've received over the years. They've been completely anonymized. The information has been changed to, make it, completely unobvious, if that's a word, as to who we're talking about. And you can see here how I have, kind of created insert strength here, right? Because when I received this goal, and this is straight from the IEP meeting, we're not speaking at all to what the child is doing right in the learning environment, or where the teacher sees them thriving, or where the adults see them thriving. And so that's a big hole missing, right? And so in some ways, that creates a cool opportunity to begin the conversation around strength identification and ways to incorporate those strengths into these goals, is just kind of leaving it blank. What do you see here, right? What might go there? I do think that California has a state mandate for strength-based IEPs that's either in effect or about to go into effect. And so I think that that is a piece of data that you can bring into these. Again, we know that there's sort of 3 levels here, right? So there's, or maybe there's 2 levels actually, where it's, you write the IEP, and then is the IEP implemented according to what's been discussed and agreed upon? And I know that those unfortunately sometimes exist in 2 different universes. So the first goal, so I think I have 5 here that we'll go over, and I encourage you to screenshot these, and then you can take the information off of them and kind of insert your own data into it to make it work, and see what it gets you, see what it gets you. So this first goal is to develop conversational skills to support reciprocal interaction. Again, a lot of the onus on the child here, right? And then retrain 3 details about 3 different peers or conversational partners, and recall those details to ask questions, or comment on the interests. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to support the child socially here, right? We want them to have, we want them to build social skills. We want them to experience success socially. And I mean, me too, you know, I want that for them as well. And also I think that there's a better way to go about it. That's more peaceful, more consensual, more in alignment with the individual constellation of needs for that child in the classroom. So given this child's passion for this thing and their strong memory for details about the subjects that they love, so I made an inference here that this child is autistic. And then I made some additional inferences about how autism is showing up for him. So, you know, realizing, you know, falling back on the same old adage, which when you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. So I'm making some sort of intuitive leaps here, but so your mileage may vary. So anyway, going back to the goal. So this goal aims to extend these skills to social interactions. They'll use their strength recalling details by learning about similar interests of 3 peers or conversational partners. So we're trying to match this child with people who share their interest, because I mean, myself, I can't talk about anything with anybody. I'm not that kind of person, and I don't know that many people are. And so expecting this child to just become this person after they're already struggling is just completely unfair. So they will then engage these peers by sharing their own insights and asking informed questions about the peers' interests, aiming to sustain meaningful dialogue in at least 3 exchanges in different settings. This will be facilitated through activities and discussions that align with W's interests and strengths. So not just expecting this child to be excited to speak about anything. I'm not excited to speak about anything. I'm excited to speak to you about strength-based education practices, but you know, like that's what I've dedicated my life to. So of course, that's what I'm going to speak on. So let's take a look at this next one. Do we have any questions about this specifically? Yeah, okay, great. Awesome. And here's the second goal. So, you know, one of the things is, in general, if I could, I would try to, I think a characteristic of a twice exceptional child, again, generally, is this sort of non-linear growth, right? I think that another way we say that is asynchronous development. And so expecting these children to align with standards of growth and communication in this linear fashion, like they're laying out in this goal, April 2024, as if you just go from one thing to another, I think is not ideal. I know that IEPs require those SMART goals, but if you can get away or extend the amount of time in which to meet a goal, I think that that's always going to be ideal. So we're asking this child to identify a variety of emotions rather, and then demonstrate and verbalize effective responses. You know, so helping others in 4 out of 5 opportunities. Yeah, I have some problems with this goal as it's written, and so I've rewritten it here. Obviously, we're bringing in their interests. Anytime you can bring in talent development into a goal, or interest preferences into a goal, you're already setting the child up for success. And so again, it goes back to identifying what those talents are, what those strengths are, you know, at that time in that child's life. And then again, I'm making some inferences about the characteristics of this child's neurological situation or cognitive diversity or cognitive difference. So perhaps the child has a preference for clear rules and sequences. Great. we can, we can build upon that. That's fantastic. Learn and practice specific scripted responses to these emotions. So here we are, as I mentioned, making the implicit explicit. So there's an amount of onus that is put back on the adults in this child's life to notice these things about this child and speak to them in a targeted fashion in order to set them up for success. So the first one is all about the child doing A, B, or C. The second one is more about, okay, how are we setting up this child so that they can do A, B, or C, right? So going back to that idea of children do well when they can. The child will demonstrate the ability to use these structured responses in real life situations. So we're making the learning authentic, which is another piece that we talk about a lot for twice exceptional children. And what are we doing here? We're hoping to provide this child with clear, consistent strategies to understand and react to emotional cues, to foster independence and interpersonal skills. So very, very human needs here. We're not asking for anything. We're not asking the child to do anything that's unnatural to who they are or within, our conventional understanding of human development and growth. Yeah, this is relevant for older students. That's great. Moments for kids to practice these. How do you provide moments for kids ages 10 plus to practice these particular skills? Let me see here. So provide moments. I think that going back to the slides about environments, whenever you're giving them social opportunities that are in alignment with their interests and their social batteries, and what by that I mean their the energy that they have to expend for social interactions, then you also are sort of talking to them beforehand about what that's going to look like for them in a social situation. So preparing them, front loading is what I call it. Then you are doing that, and that works for children, I think, of all ages. I'm sorry, just one second. I talk so much in these that I get really thirsty. Pardon me. All right, let's look at goal 3. So when given the opportunity for peer interactions, so we're talking about lunch, recess, free time, games, activities, the child will independently interact with peers by initiating and maintaining conversations or activities, participating in a minimum of 5 back and forth turn-taking exchanges. I'm always like, how are you doing this? Like, do you have like a little thing where you're like, check, 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 It's like very, I would love more information about how people are tracking these things so specifically in like neurological terms like this, but regardless, I know what they're after, I know what they're going for. So again, you can see here that I am making some inferences because I receive, these are all anonymous. These are sent to me anonymously. I don't know, which is great. I don't know the family's situation necessarily. And so again, your mileage may vary, but you can take this and input whatever this is. It's sort of like a Mad Lib, right? And that's something I actually have been talking to Dr. Susan Baum about. Her and I collaborate on these a lot, which is we sort of like need like a Mad Lib of strength-based IEP goals that is like, given this, then that, and here's what you might get, under best circumstances. But that's forthcoming. So proficiency with structured tasks and visual or tactile learning. What is the goal even for, right? The goal is to enhance their social engagement through preferred mediums. And so in some ways, when you go back to what the goal is even is even for, you create a stage for more brainstorming around ways to shift the goal to be more targeted and to be more effective for the child. So really just always coming back to the, like, why are we talking about this? What is the goal? What do we want for this child? What are we hoping to see happen? And is it appropriate? And yeah, is it appropriate? So in conducive peer interactions such as lunch, recess, class activities. So then I would go back to, and I would have a conversation about this where I would say, okay, is lunch really the best time? Is it loud? Is it rushed? Do they even get to sit with people? Do they get to sit with people that they have things in common with? So teasing out these, what we're calling opportunities for peer interactions, and really asking ourselves, is it actually an opportunity for peer interaction that is in alignment with their sensory needs? So again, making all of this accessible through the environment is key for the success of any of this. So leading structured by sharing or leading structured activities that align with their strengths, puzzles, building blocks, drawing, shared interests as a foundation to interact, aiming to participate in at least 5 turn-taking exchanges. Yeah, so again, we brought in their metrics, which are important, but we're really doubling down. You can see, I think I talk about it 3 times in this goal, where we're really doubling down on those personal interests, strengths, and then, you know, fostering a sense of belonging and mutual respect among peers. So that's that mutual respect among peers. It's not just a one-way street, right? We're talking about reciprocity. Okay, I think we're doing good on time. Let's see. Maintain their attention on task. I think it's supposed to say on a task during class lessons and assignments in order to complete assignments on time, daily basis across all academic settings with 90% success. So I guess one of the things that, you know, if it was me in these meetings and I would always try to expand the window of, you know, time or that we expect these things to be accomplished. In this case, I would try to lessen this 90% and I would say, okay, how about 70%? Because we want to, I guess we want to sort of like expand the window or opportunity for growth or tolerance around using these skills so that we can set them up for as much success as possible. So that's another thing that I would advocate for, if appropriate. If you think that the child can do 90% success, then great, you know what I mean? But I would always be saying, like, okay, how could we get that number down? So that, because something I always talked about in the learning environment when I was talking to parents about joining my programs, which is like, we want to set them up for, you know, easy wins, success as soon as possible to get that virtuous cycle going that we know becomes a sort of turbine or engine for transformation and growth on behalf of the children in a positive fashion. So giving them like quick, easy wins, or just opportunity or an increased opportunity for quick and easy wins is always going to be fantastic. So again, you can see in this updated goal, I'm talking about utilizing their strengths in varied short-term activities. So I'm saying, well, you know, we're not expecting them to sort of you know, sustain this over a prolonged amount of time. We want to, you know, again, we want to give them those quick wins by incorporating creative project-based elements into each task, breaking down assignments into smaller, manageable segments. So here we're talking about the intellectual environment and yeah, the intellectual environment. And then talking about how the success is measured. I used their 90% success rate, even though I would try to make that smaller in the meeting. And And going back to the goal for this, the reason in the first place. So, we're talking about acknowledging the child's unique learning style, promoting sustained attention and timely assignment completions through strategies that resonate with their natural inclinations. So then you can have a conversation about what those natural inclinations are. Yeah, so just really talking about the child holistically at every opportunity rather than just as sort of, I don't know, this is extreme language, but, kind of an automaton that is programmed to achieve a goal. Unfortunately, when I look at these original goals, that's what it reminds me of. Realizing that the people have like the best intentions. What if they really just want your child to thrive in the learning environment, but they have not been given the tools in order to know what that looks like, how to implement it. So speaking to that discrepancy that I shared on slide 3, I think. Okay, I think this is the last one, and then we'll talk more. Expresses a negative emotion at school, identify and appropriately use a coping skill, perspective taking, assertive communication, deep breathing, problem solving. So a negative emotion at school. I'm gonna like back up in this conversation and be like, why is the negative emotion happening in the first place, right? And what can we put in place so that it doesn't get to that point of activation? So, if I was presented with this in a meeting or in a conversation with families, that's how I would start the conversation. Is I would back up and say, okay, what is inspiring these negative emotions, and what can we do to stop that? To stop it. So, encouraged to engage with personalized coping strategies that align with their interests and strengths. So I think that, well-meaning adults have put sort of, mindfulness tactics, things of that nature into the learning environment with the hope of increasing emotional regulation amongst their students. But for some of our twice exceptional children, that doesn't cut it. That doesn't work, not yet, especially the ones that are more sensory seeking. They need to be sitting quietly and notice, and taking time to notice and breathe deeply isn't in alignment with their sensory and perceptive systems. And so we're like setting them up to fail right away, right? So if you know that a child is, sensory seeking, is needing of more stimulation in order to feel regulated, right? Then that's what you need to give them, the opportunity to do and the space to do that. And so we call it a calm down kit, but it might be a punching kit or something. I don't know, not like a punching bag or something, not like other people. So, but I'm just saying a calm down kit that's individualized for a student might look not exactly in alignment with what we would think of as calming down. To return to a state of calm and readiness to learn. The goal prioritizes autonomy and self-knowledge, supporting their emotional regulation in a way that feels respectful and empowering. So I'm just like bringing that language back in of like, why are we doing this? What is this for? What good things do we actually want for the child, that actually contribute to their long-term success, versus just doing their work in the classroom like we want them to. So like in some ways it's like when you're updating these goals, it's like you're zooming way out and you're zooming way in at the same time, and making these specific to the child's profile, and also speaking to what shifts can take place amongst the professionals that are working with the child and also in their environment. And so I think that these goals, I have a 6th one. What? I thought I just had 5, excuse me. well, I think that we've talked about I think we've talked about these. Yeah, bonus. Number 6 is a lot like number 5. Number 7, self-determination. By the next annual review, he'll be able to independently organize at least 80% of his classwork for multiple academic periods for 3 consecutive weeks. Oh, right. So bringing the child in on ways to, create these personalized organizational schools, color-coded binders, visual schedules, apps that gamify task management. I think gamification is huge for organization. I mean, it is for me. For me, I have, from my, I don't, I thrive off. I couldn't get anything done without a Pomodoro. And I have like one of those little apps on my phone that like gives me like a little cute thing whenever I complete a Pomodoro, and I love it. And so, me as like an almost 45-year-old woman, I, enjoying this gamification of organizational skills and executive function, I can only imagine that a child will like it so much more. And that's been my experience as well in the classroom. So let's see here, regular check-ins where he can reflect on what's working, so asking them, not necessarily like putting it on them as in you didn't reach this goal, but like, how is this working for you? I think so much can be accomplished again with curiosity and just, a non sort of confrontational way of speaking to, pretty much another individual in general, but here we're talking about children, just like, how is this working for you? I noticed that this worked well when this happened. How was that for you? How was that for you is a question that I absolutely love and use endlessly and have received so much positive benefit from using in my practice with children. And so that's what I want to offer to you. Yeah, okay, great. So as mentioned, I am the lab director for the Strength-Based Assessment Lab at the Bridges Graduate School of Cognitive Diversity. That is a mouthful, but I would love to talk to you more about what we do there. If you're interested, you can get at me. But now what I'd love to do is just talk to you about any questions that you have. And so we can make this very targeted for you. Awesome. So how was that? How was that for you?
It's probably the first time that I've seen sort of the child included in the goals. That's
yeah, that's telling in so many ways, right? Yeah. I think someone's trying to speak, but they're on mute still. No.
Would you guys like to raise hands, or I'm assuming people are coming on video because they'd like to ask a question? Michelle or Yush or Iman, did somebody have a question? Go ahead, Michelle.
Hi.
Hi, I'm loving your presentation. I'm in the middle of rewriting a plan that came up with a very quick meeting in a very big high school. And I was just took what they wrote and I was rewriting everything kind of similarly to some ways that you presented. But then I haven't sent it in because I felt a little daunted, like, okay, you're the expert at the district and here I am as a rewriting these things. Do you have any suggestions on how to approach the fact that you want things to be more child-centered and more positive strength-based? Like, how do you approach the administration that you're dealing with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think again, it's going to come back to curiosity, what's possible here. I think talking about what's possible here, I think offering solutions is huge. Me as a professional, I would love it if a parent was like, here, I made this for you. And, and then I could go off of that rather than having to use my time and creativity to, one, train myself about what this means in the first place. And then two, try to come up with something coherent based off of something I just learned about, you know? So I think that I would hope that that person would see that as a gift. And I think if you word your email in the correct way, it will be received that way. And yeah.
And Jade, I'm
I hope
wondering,
that
have you
helps.
gotten pushback from schools to these, or mostly it's been well received?
Honestly, I'm like going through I'm going through the last year and a half now. It's a mixed bag, you know, it's so it's so individual. Some people are like, we just didn't know what to do, but now we do, and this is great, and we're already, you know, it's not perfect. Like these things aren't like, you know, this isn't a magic wand. It's not like you're gonna have these things and then all of a sudden everything's great, you know, like that's not how this works. And I think we all already know that. But it provides a little opening into what's possible, and then that opening can grow with increased success, right? And so you know, they'll be like, this is great, we're on the right, we feel like we're on the right track again. You know, the kids excited to come to school, the kids doing this great, that great. And the thing is that if you can, how do I want to say this? We're doing something joyful here, right? Like we're bringing more joy and more fun into the learning environment and into the kid's life. And that makes everybody's life easier and more interesting as far as what I can tell, you know, from what I can tell. And so I think when it is, you know, when it's delivered in that vein and that with that energy, I think that that is contagious. And particularly through my assessment conversations, you know, I mentioned that we talk to non-related adults, so that might be like coaches, therapists, ideally it's teachers. When I start talking to them about this stuff and I invite them to have fun and be creative and, you know, think about possibilities, I notice teachers become reinvigorated about what they're there to do and get excited about it. And so, and that's energy that I bring that to the conversation, and then it catches on, you know? And so I think like, I know you all are in California and I'm a Californian, so I hate to be talking about the energy you bring to a situation, but like, I think we all know what that means. So like, what is your vibe, you know? But it's true, vibes matter. So cultivating a good vibe is maybe step one.
Okay, so we have a bunch of questions, so I'll just ask the people who are coming off mute to ask, to just keep it short so that we can wrap up at 1. Sharon, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you. The talk is excellent. I love it, everything about it, and I love the whole thing. I wanted to ask, it seems that the goal for many schools of the IEP goals is to show that there is progress and to basically kind of like push kids out of the IEP so that they would not need any more services or any more support. And so especially for the academic goals, it seemed like the goals that you've shown are going more in depth with a bigger impact. And the goal that what I see in the IEP that I am supporting, I see teeny tiny goals that the purpose is to show, yes, he got that, yes, he did that, so they will not need any more support. How do I change academic support? The academic goals.
Yeah. So are you talking about like performance in terms of comprehension around specific skills or subject matter and curriculum? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I had something for this and then it just escaped my mind. So first we need to sort of understand how the child learns, right? So what are their cognitive preferences in that moment? How are they how are they best receiving, you know, novel information? How do they best review? That's specific to each person, right? So we need to make sure that the correct instructional strategies are in place first before they can show comprehension or an increase in skills or abilities. So I would bring that piece in. What are their strengths around how they learn, okay? And then I would ask for those levels of comprehension to be met through things that they're interested in, or, you know, proclivities that they have. So that's another piece that I would bring in. Yeah, that's my 2 bits of advice. Make sure that the instructional strategies are in alignment with their cognitive preferences. So showing cognitive respect to their, you know, I'm sorry to say this word again, cognition. But, and I think that would be step 1 around those academic goals. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and also this is the other bit that came out of my mind, which is, gosh, how do I say this? I think you can say something like, you know, like I wear contacts and glasses, right? And I need contacts and glasses to see. And so you're not like inspiring me to, you know, improve my eyesight by taking away my contacts and glasses. You know, I'm not going to be like, oh, she can see so well now, let's take away her contacts and glasses. Well, I needed those to see in the first place, you know? And so I think if you rely on a metaphor like that, you know, then maybe people will get it that they're not accommodations, it's accessibility, right? So I think when you bring that switch of language into the conversation, that can help as well. I hope that helped.
Thank you. Yeah.
Iman, do you want to ask next?
Hi, yeah, sure.
Hi.
Just to piggyback off of Sharon, because I do see that as I have a range of kids. As my kids get older, a lot of skills get faded out. You know, reading fluency isn't as important in high school. Oh, they have a computer, they don't need to do that. And so it resonates with what you were just saying. But I love the curiosity focus because so many times IEPs can be really confrontational when you don't know what's going on. And asking questions has helped. Sharing your child's perspective, like that's been an eye opener. We've started doing that with my second son, who is, we just try to get more practice in. And I'm curious because it is such a holistic approach to get a lot of this. How do you incorporate like expectations that teach? I'm finding everything becomes compartmentalized, like what the teachers do and real world application versus like IEP goals and what those standards are set on because the language is different. So setting like expectations, I don't know if you have any suggestions or whatnot, just in that realm of conversation.
So the professionals in the school having the appropriate expectations of the child, is that what you're referring? Is that what you mean?
Right, versus like in real world and, you know, real time, the teacher's expectations, like I'll get, oh, well, if I could get half of my kids to do that, you know, and I'm like, no, this is a real struggle for the kid and their disability. And so how, you know, to bridge that gap, I don't know if you have, you know, I'm just collecting tricks and language as you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. So appropriate expectations. I think that there's something there about knowing how a skill builds upon itself, how an ability builds upon itself, and then kind of reverse engineering from there. Has the child shown that they can do A, B, and C before we're just expecting them to jump to D, right? And so breaking the goal down into more manageable tasks with metrics that can be checked in along the way, rather than just expecting a skip from like no % to 90%, you know? I think is something that you can do. I think if you, going back to that slide about observing students, so I'm Montessori trained, and in Montessori, we talk about a sensitive period where we notice that through observation, we notice that the child seems sensitive or open to growth and learning. And so being able to communicate what that looks like for your child to the professionals in their life, I think could help with generating expectations, because that's like, for a Montessori teacher, that's like a moment when you want to like introduce a new skill. That's when you know it's time to like move on to the next level of something. And so of a topic. And so I think knowing what it looks like when your child is ready to grow or in a space to grow, and then also reverse engineering from what the expectation is to what all the steps that are going to need to be accomplished in order to meet that expectation are two ways I would go about that. I would try both. I hope that helps.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, awesome.
Love the presentation.
Oh, good.
Yush, would you like to ask your question?
Hi.
Hey.
Jade, thank you so much. I only caught a few minutes of your presentation because I totally lost track of time and I forgot to join at 3 o'clock. So my first question is, will you be sharing the presentation at all after this?
I think so.
We will share the recording, and Jade, are you comfortable sharing the slides as well?
Yeah, totally.
So we will send them
Perfect.
both out.
Thank you. And I feel like Sharon might have asked kind of something similar to what I'm interested in. When you get to a point where the IEP is essentially the child has mastered, right, all of the goals, kind of what is the next step? Is the school's intention really trying to push the child out of that support areas? Because I think a lot about what you're saying essentially, which is preventative measures. I don't see that IEPs are really meant to be preventative. They're really looking at addressing kind of a specific critical need, and once that need has been met, they kind of move on. So if that's the case, and you get to a point where the child's needs have been maybe the behavioral issues have been eliminated, but it's also a child that's gifted. So how do you then start to address supporting them in those areas that really aren't a problem in the near term, but could become an area of concern if they're not getting that engagement or the challenge or whatever? You also talked about the interests and the strengths. So how are you then addressing their needs from a strengths perspective? And if you touched on this already and I missed it, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think we did. I think we touched on it, but it's cool to talk about it again, which is I think that there's a reflective conversation that needs to have happened there. There's a debriefing there, and that I think that would require a certain amount of tracking, which is, I noticed when he was receiving this, access to advanced math curriculum, or was, accelerated in this way, or you compacted the curriculum this way, these behaviors seemed to drop off. How can we work together to ensure that is maintained so that we don't, see ourselves going backwards in terms of all of this growth that the child has accomplished, and all this change that has been made. I think that's the way I would talk about that, and I would try to have, a specific short stories that I could tell, about that, so that I wasn't just sort of like, well, things got better when X happened. I would be like, things got better in this measurable way, or this, concrete way. And that provides you a really nice launching point for making sure that those gifted needs are addressed.
Okay, it is almost 1 o'clock, so I'm just going to, there's one more question in the chat and then we'll wrap up. One parent is asking about when you have student teacher conferences instead of parent teacher conferences, so the student is leading it, what kind of questions can the parents ask the student so that they sort of start to lead the teacher in the right direction? Helping him lead the teacher in the right direction by asking leading questions. Hila, I don't know if you want to come off mute and ask your question. I think she's saying like what kind of questions can be asked of a child in a parent-teacher conference when the student is there, so that because the student is leading it, not the parent, how can the student sort of say, how can you steer the student in the right way to get the teacher to understand some of the things that you've been mentioning?
Well, I think that there has to be a conversation before the conversation, right? So I think that there has, practicing at home, exactly. I think that there has to be a conversation before the conversation where you prepare them to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is why it's important. This is how it might affect you. So, so let's start talking about, when you have really felt like yourself and have had fun and have learned and and these kinds of things, and doing it in a way that is not non-confrontational, where sitting down and being like, tell me about a time that you have learned, like that doesn't really work really for anybody, right? So I think it has to be like improvisational conversation that maybe occurs, over time. It maybe happens while you're driving in the car on the way to something. It maybe happens before bedtime. I feel like kids always have a bunch of things to report before bedtime, and so maybe you can really take advantage of that. And while playing. Yeah, exactly. And so I think the conversation before the conversation is where that stuff is going to reveal itself, and talking about the importance of communicating that to the other adults so that they can help. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jade. This is amazing. I'm sure we can go on and on with more questions. But we're going to wrap up, and we will be sending out the recording and your slides and links to the Strength Assessment Lab. So thank you so much for being here, and happy
Thank you for
Celebration,
having me. Yes, happy Neurodiversity Week, everyone. All right. I'm here for additional questions. Callie knows how to get a hold of me. Thank you for having me. This is wonderful, great questions, and maybe I'll see you next year or before then. Who knows? All right.
So much.
Do we just leave, or what do we got?
Callie,
What
do you want to
happened?
stop recording?